But let me hand it over now to Olga Kordas from KTH. So Olga, please tell us a bit more about Viable Cities, your strategic innovation program, to bring Swedish cities towards climate neutrality by 2030. Can we actually do that? Floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and it's a big pleasure for me to talk to you. And of course, we have a lot of inspiration from each other and collaboration between Swedish and Finnish city. And this, if I'm thinking about one thing, would be the ferry between Vasa and Umeå with the world's largest battery on this type of the ship. So Swedish and Finnish cities are driving not only innovation inside our cities, but also influence the development in Europe and the world. Yes, I am Olga Kordas. I'm Director of Viable Cities, and then I'm also Associate Professor in Sustainable Urban Development at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. So about Viable Cities. So Viable Cities is a strategic innovation program, and we are calling it also now as National Platform for Climate Neutral and Sustainable Cities. We are funded by 3 governmental agencies, Vinnova, Innovation Agency, Swedish Energy Agency, and Formas, with the agency funding research within sustainability field. And we are a very long-term program, 12 years program, and our funding period is at least until 2030. We're also member-based, so it's not only municipalities that are participating, but also companies, civil society organizations, and of course universities. And now, in some way, all largest universities and research institutes in Sweden are connected to Viable Cities. We are hosted by Royal Institute of Technology, KTH, and RISE is a very important partner in the program team, and also Lund University. And you will hear from my colleague from Lund University, Sofia, also about how we are working with Swedish cities. So we are one of the first in Europe and in the world innovation programs that worked with mission-oriented approach. And already 2018, we formulated our mission on climate neutral cities by 2030 with a good life for all within planetary boundaries. Showing clearly that it's not only about CO2 emissions, it's about the quality of life, it's about resource efficiency, it's about biodiversity, it's about, so this quality of life will also just climate transition. So Viable Cities, so we are we're working with Swedish cities, and we're working now with 48 cities representing 50% of Sweden's population. We are also part of Net Zero Cities, the European city mission, as we've heard just recently. And among all those 112 cities, there are 7 Swedish cities. We are also participating in this in capacities where we help in other member states to organize Viable Cities alike, or other types of national platforms. And we're also working globally, not least with CHAMP, and CHAMP is a coalition of high ambitions, multi-level government partnerships, where both Sweden and Finland and also EU are part of, and the goal there is just to enhance collaboration on the local level, regional level, national level of actors, because we know that cities by themselves don't have direct zones of influence on all the emissions. So collaboration on all these levels is important. So in Sweden, so we are having 7 cities on this EU cities mission, but we have 48 cities that we are working with, and we grew from 9 cities, first Cities for a Runner 2019, to 23 cities, to 48 cities from end of 2024. So while we could say yes, maybe interest and the tools on the climate transition in Europe and on the global scales are not so now maybe not as much on the agenda as we wanted to have, then on the local level, not least in Sweden, we see more and more bigger and bigger interest in climate transition on the local level. And it's because kind of those multiple benefits of climate transition. So we're doing many things like within the kind of climate actions that are important for our cities to become more attractive and more livable. And so interesting thing in Sweden, at least, that we started with the largest cities of Sweden, or at least not all of them, but most of the largest cities. And now we introduce this twin cities approach, where smaller cities collaborating with larger cities on like driving and accelerating transition together. Yeah, and as we've also heard, I mean, what's important for climate transition? We know that one actor cannot do anything, they even kind of anything, so something, but not leading to this high ambition targets. So it's very important to have a local mobilization in the transition, what we call transition arena. So it's a collaboration between municipality, between companies, universities, and civil society organizations. But also it's to go from fragmented, shiny solutions to new normal. So instead of having one project there about electrification of transport and another project here about some circularity, it's to create the portfolio of initiatives that all those initiatives strengthening each other and leading to systemic change. So within viable cities, we are having these 48 cities, but they are not working only by like each, and we are not providing support to each single city, but we are co-creating and collaborating with all cities together. And this is a kind of a power of many. This is the most important for us. So we have what's called Viable Cities Transition Lab, where all cities so that kind of with viable cities are participating. And this is in order to together develop those theory and methods of change. So how, like, what is important to happen so that our cities can become climate neutral faster. Then also, like, how do we work like on synergies between different cities work, but also synergies between works within different sectors and different actors. Also, like, how can we innovate on new ways of decision making and policy development, and how we work on capacity buildings together. So we're having our large conferences and large events also for co-creation, not only listening to each other, but for co-creation. And the last one was for several weeks ago in Eskilstuna, where we had 300 participants. And this was about collaboration between municipalities and industries. So this was very successful and very important conference, which also showed that industry and industrial partners and companies and want to see the high climate targets. And the kind of idea that this ambitious climate goals is bad for the business is fake news. So within Viable Cities, we have developed what's called Climate City Contracts. We've heard also that these Climate City Contracts kind of maybe not the whole approach, but kind of some of these ideas were taken on the European level. I will not talk a lot about what we are doing and how we are doing. Probably Sophie would talk a little bit about that. But it's very important tools that we have developed. And then, as I mentioned, that we are creating those kind of national, like local transition arenas, helping like through Climate City contracting with very many companies connected to cities transition work. Just few examples. So, like one tool that we have developed is called Systems Demonstrator, and it's because we were so tired on the pilots that never becomes a new normal, about kind of fragmented work, about work which is on technological development separately or policy development separately. So we created larger type of projects which we call system demonstrators, where cities together with their partners are working on both like technological development, but also policy development, business models, involvement of citizens, behavioral change, and so. And one of these very successful system demonstrator is in Lund, and it's called Coaction Lund. They are focusing both on the low emission mobility systems, but also on distributed and local energy system, which is called EnergyNet. And this is very close example. Maybe if you are working with a smart city, this is kind of a real smart city solution, because the whole idea is how we create the like local energy nets from the experiences of how we created our broadband and internet. So Lund has started with a system demonstrator. Now 4 other cities are taking this approach, and then many more cities are planning also to introduce a similar solutions or the same solution. So we are always working on scaling. So not one single experimentation that we forget about, but it's how we create something new which works and then scale it. Yes, and another question is, of course, it's again about the scaling. How do we accelerate implementation? So it's not only about innovation. So we are very good to innovate, I think, in Sweden, but and then Finland, of course. But the question is kind of how do we go from one single innovation solution to the new normal, to kind of implementation and scale. And it's not so easy, because normally you have money and prestige and doing one first shiny thing, but it's less maybe budgets and less support for scaling. We introduced something which we call accelerators. So we have, for example, created accelerators of green travel plans. I will not come into details about what is that about, but the idea is how municipality together with and regional actors together with big employers can develop kind of more sustainable mobility system. And in Sweden, we have several municipalities that developed the approach of green travel plans, and through the kind of joint action, so we could enhance implementation of the same or similar methods and tools in many other municipalities of Sweden. And this is why it's important that many municipalities collaborate. I also want to say that kind of one of the very important, like because of this global situation and because of the climate change that we experience kind of nearly every day now. So that's a question about synergies between climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and preparedness and civil preparedness for crisis, but also, unfortunately, thinking about if the war is coming is very important. So we are working on the finding. So how can we work on with synergies between those actions? And for example, so here is example from Karlstad, where municipalities was looking, okay, what are the sectors and areas where these synergies are kind of easy to build on and important to build on. And just again, because of the smart city focus of our conference, kind of one of the action was looking for the tools that Karlstad municipality has, which is called the smart map Karlstad, where all sharing solutions and services are collected. So then you can find different services as a kind of organization, as a citizen. And here you can see that. So so they both looking for, okay, what is the climate benefits, and climate benefits is clear, but also what is a benefit to preparedness and resilience. And then they say, okay, almost all of the solutions are in some degree important for resilience, and also preparedness, from transportation of bicycle repair and car sharing to food and to electronics. But also those solutions, they lead to more trust and collaboration, both between residents, between citizens and organization. And this is extremely important for preparedness. It's not only technology we're talking about. So I would like to finalize my talk with a quote from one of the mayors of our city, of Borlänge, who is saying basically that climate transition is faster when we do it together. And when we're talking about together, it's together between different cities. So that each city doesn't need to innovate everything, but we are learning, reflecting and learning from each other very fast, but also collaboration between municipalities and companies, civil society organizations, universities. So this is the only way for us to reach climate targets, not only at the individual city level, but of our society. And that's why I think that we are super happy to collaborate both between Swedish cities and Finnish cities, and we want to see even more of this type of collaborations, but of course also between our organizations. So it's super happy to see strong collaboration between, for example, VTT and RISE, and just want to see more of this very concrete example of collaboration between us. And thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Olga. This was wonderful. I was so happy in particular to see, how you are doing demonstrations across these multiple cities. And then the key highlight for me was peer-to-peer learning. Because, if we look at the scale of our countries, Finland, Sweden, area-wise very large, population-wise quite small, but then there's so much we can actually do together when we share and learn from each other.